Peppa Pig has been on air since 2004, and over the course of more than 2 decades, the show has become a part of millions of people's lives around the world. But do you have any idea how the world of Peppa came about, or what year the story of Peppa Pig and her family takes place? Stick around until the end of this video to find out everything you need to know about Peppa's timeline. Most people have no clue, but Peppa's world has actually existed for millions of years. At least that's what they say. What can we infer when we watch the episode The Stone Age Grandma? We see Grandpa Pig explaining to Peppa and George what Grandma and her friends are pretending to be prehistoric people, which the episode title suggests. We're taking a step back into ancient times when humanity was still living in caves and hunting mammoths for food. This part of history happened around 60,000 years ago when humans, not pigs, were the ones living in caves. However, if we look at it this way literally, the Stone Age lasted about 2.7 million years, but we could say that Peppa's world has been around even longer since we see George finding a dinosaur bone while helping Grandpa Pig look for one. That bone would be millions of years old, since many scientists say dinosaurs went extinct about 66 million years ago. The characters in Peppa's world are totally aware of these facts. As Grandma Pig and her friends try to recreate what life was like back then, Peppa and George are joining in on the fun after the Stone Age. Peppa's world seems to follow a timeline that's pretty similar to ours. We can see this in the episode about Roman Day, which connects some of the show's most historic moments with Grandma Pig and her older friends. This time we see them dressed in classic Roman outfits, like legionaries and senators. If we check the history books, we'll find out that this period started way before. From Christ and ending nearly 500 years after him, the episode shows that in the past there were indeed emperors and centurions wearing helmets like Peppa and George. Just as the fall of the Roman Empire marked the beginning of the Middle Ages for us, the same thing seems to happen in Peppa's world. This becomes clear when we notice various Viking references in the show. For example, in the same episode where George finds the dinosaur bone, we also see Grandpa Pig discovering something. If we take a close look at a gold coin, we'll notice it has a Viking symbol on it. This references the Viking invasions of England that happened over 1,000 years ago during the Middle Ages. Plus, we see Grandma Pig and her friends pretending to be Vikings, but instead of invading England, they're just looking for something to eat. After the Middle Ages with knights and Vikings, we can tell that Peppa's world has also moved into modern times, and we can see this in a small way. In this episode, Peppa goes on a field trip to the Science Museum, and at one point, Edmund the elephant flies a rocket made by Grandpa Rabbit. If we take a close look at this scene, we can see that one of the paintings the little elephant passes in his rocket shows Mr. Gazelle dressed as a soldier from the French Revolution, kind of like a gazelle from Napoleon's time. This is also the first time we see a non-human character represented as a historical figure in Peppa's world. It's likely that this Mr. Gazelle is the same one from the painting in Madame Gazelle's house, which we'll talk about soon. Beyond this image of Mr. Gazelle dressed as a soldier, we find other clues that give us a clearer picture of the timeline in Peppa's world. If you also enjoy the show and its little details, drop a comment below with the number Peppa. For instance, in another episode, we see a big monument in front of a huge building, and at the top of a tall column it's a statue of a man in old military clothes. The coolest part is that this monument is real, and it's in England. It's called Nelson's Column. This historic statue dates back to 1843 and honors Admiral Nelson from the British royal family, who died in 1805, even though he was born in 1758. This shows that Peppa Pig's timeline includes events that happened over 200 years ago, and that's not the only evidence supporting this when the family of pigs visit the United States. Peppa looks through a viewpoint and sees the big Statue of Liberty, the iconic symbol of the US built in 1876. It's almost 150 years old and has a human face. Honestly, I thought by the time Peppa visited, we'd see a rabbit or a pig version of the Statue of Liberty. But anyway, sticking to Peppa's story, we had the presence of the Queen of England in the episode when Queen Elizabeth was still alive, and the reference to the monarch is a bit odd. Given this, we know that Queen Elizabeth was born in 1926, so if we see her ruling in this episode, it's a fact that she was born almost 100 years ago. Let's not forget that she dreamed of becoming a queen and getting all the chocolate she wanted. Another detail that takes us back to this time is when the P family visits Madame Gazelle's house, where we notice a photo on her wall of a man who is probably Mr. Gazelle, her late husband. The truth is, the photo isn't there. Old-fashioned, but judging by Mr. Gazelle's outfit, we can guess the photo was taken in the 1920s, around the time Queen Elizabeth was born. This makes a lot of sense since the same character shows up in the museum painting during the scene with the rocket and the elephant, Edmund, which suggests this character lived a very long life. Some would even say if he were a vampire, like Madame Gazelle. We covered that story on our channel where we proved that Peppa's teacher is actually a vampire. Transylvania, if you're curious, click on the card above and follow the timeline of Peppa. The show also mentions an event that happened about 90 years ago. We're talking about the day Peppa and George found a bottle on the beach while they were walking with their grandma. When they opened the bottle and read the letter inside, they found a message from someone named Reg Rabbit. After calling the contact in the letter, we discovered that Reg Rabbit and Grandpa Rabbit are actually the same person. The same guy, Grandpa Rabbit, explains that he threw that bottle into the sea about 100 years ago. Based on the way Grandpa Rabbit looks and the fact that he can write a letter, we can guess he was probably around 4 or 5 years old back then. Plus, we can see he was exaggerating a bit when he said he tossed the bottle 100 years ago, because if it were true, he would be nearly 105 years old. So to be a bit more realistic with the character, we can assume that they threw the letter into the sea about 90 years ago or so. That's a long time, and since time is money, don't waste any more of it. Click the subscribe button if you haven't subscribed yet. If there's anyone older or as old as Grandpa Rabbit, it's Madame Gazelle. It becomes pretty clear when we watch the episode with Madame Gazelle. We see something that leads us to this conclusion right away. Peppa's teacher's friendly tree, which is right next to her house. He planted the little tree many years ago when it was just a small sprout. Now we see that it's as tall as, if not taller than, Madame Gazelle's 4-story house, which is about 12 meters high. According to Botanical Info, a pine takes around 40 years to reach that height, but Madame Gazelle is also a part of another significant moment in history, the childhood of Dad P and Mom P. In the episode Madame Gazelle's Reading Party, we see a flashback with young Dad P and the young Mom and Dad were students back in the old days. Considering both characters are now adults with 2 kids, one who's 5 and another who's 3, we can guess this all happened about 30 years ago, which fits with the timeline of Peppa Pig. Now, the big question is, what year does the Peppa show actually take place? There are a few theories about this. The first one is that the show is set between 2004 and 2005, the years it first aired. But that can't be right. In the episode with Mr. Fox's van, we see a sign on his vehicle that says he's been in the buying and selling game since 2010. This hints that Peppa's world is set sometime after that. Plus, we know there have been 6 Christmas episodes over several seasons. And since Christmas only happens once a year, we could technically say a few years have passed in the show. However, practically speaking, that's not the case since none of the kids have aged, significantly grown so far. This makes it a mystery exactly what year Peppa's world is set in. We know that Queen Elizabeth was still alive, so Peppa's world definitely takes place before 2022, the year the Queen passed away. This leads us to conclude that Peppa's stories happened sometime between 2010 and 2022. That's the full timeline of events in Peppa Pig. If you enjoyed this, go ahead and pick another video to watch with us. Click on the one that's showing up on your screen, or you can visit the channel and pick another one. Until next time.